So John, when did your love affair with Northumbria start?
Well, if you remember, we went to Bible college at Berwick-upon-Tweed, and we lived with Andy Rain, and you cannot live with Andy and not have an infectious love for Northumbria. Andy's main vision in life was to live on Holy Island, which is the island of the Celtic saints, of Aidan, Cuthbert, and he used to call that the Upper Springs. And we always had a thing that there would also be a place of the Nether Springs, near Holy Island, and we used those two metaphors to focus on a vision. And when Bishop David said to us, the best thing I can do for you is not to bring you into the church, but to send you into the desert, that's exactly where we thought we'd go in Northumbria. We'd head for Northumbria, and we'd find the place of the Nether Springs. And basically, that's what we did. It took us 2 years. We used to go up and down, travelling back and forwards, praying, asking God to find us a place, and we eventually found a flat in a country house, an old dowager house, and our dear friends who travelled with us, Chris and Sandra Haggison, they found a house too, and it was just nearby. And Andy was just around the corner, so the few of us started off trying to work out what this new monasticism was. And I can't think of a better place to do it than in Northumbria, where the air's thin, and there's a real sense of the presence of God and of continuity of Christian community.
And it's also quite a key area, isn't it, historically, with the Celts and...
Historically, it's a major area. In British history, we're usually taught that Christianity came up from the south through the European church, but Christianity basically came from the north, from the Irish church, but it didn't really fit our British history very well. You don't need to smile, Gareth, being a good Northern Irish lad, but that's the fact. And Aidan was sent from the great place in Iona, where many of the Irish saints came, as well as the Scots, and the Celtic Church played a tremendous role in evangelising Britain.
So, where you yourself and Linda and Andy, I believe, you founded the Northumbria community. Where does it come into this? At what point does that all come in? And how did you get to that point? Is it small step, big step?
No, it was a long step. We were about 7 years living out the new monasticism, and I mean, living it out practically. Linda and I had 4 kids, so when you talk about living a new monastic life, you've got to think, how am I going to feed the children? How am I going to pay the rent? How am I going to do the normal things that everybody else does? And together with Chris and Sandra, less so with Andy because he was further away, we developed a way of living, which involved saying daily prayer, involved the way that we worked. Chris and I dug gardens, we cleaned windows. Together as families, we received people. Hospitality is a big thing, a part of our life. And so we were learning, basically, how to live. And then...
A way for living.
A way for living it was. And the prayers, the prayers that we said then. For example, in the office book, the Northumbrian office book, there's a prayer which says, establish thou the work of our hands, establish thou the work of our hands. And Chris and I used that when we used to go to work, because we'd often have conflicts of interest. I remember one time we'd hired a JCB on site. We were doing some landscaping, and we had somebody in terrible need turned up at the house. And Chris and I had to go back, and we had to just leave our JCB on site, and it was very expensive. And care for the people who came. This was 3 days. And it was wonderful because we got a phone call from the hire people saying, look, we can't come and get the JCB, can you keep us for another week? And that conflict was resolved, but often conflicts weren't, we had to work it out. But the Northumbria community crept up on us. As Andy'd say, it was an unexpected surprise. And basically, after about 5 or 6 years, we used to have a thing called Easter Workshop, and every Easter we'd meet on Holy Island and celebrate with lots of friends that we were making Easter. It's a fantastic time. I hope the community still continue it, but it was a great building time. And a community began to form around us. And suddenly things started to change because we went from a few to being many. And the next thing, we're talking about getting a community house, and Roy Searle then joined us from Northumbria Ministries, and we went from a few to many, and we had to sort it out. So the prayers that we used got turned into a, well, you know it, Celtic daily prayer. It's quite famous now. It started off as the Northumbria office. The way that we lived got turned into a rule for community. So those things preceded the community, and they also gave birth to the community. And you know, Linda and I had 6 tremendous years leading the Northumbria community. They're the happiest, precious memories of our lives. And certainly the prayer group, the life of the community, began to spread new monasticism throughout the UK and further.
So the Northumbria community was really born not out of some higher desire to build something, but out of a life experience, and from this life experience also was born your daily prayer, your rhythm for life, and all other sorts of resources and precious times that came out of this period.
Yeah, they just happened out of what we were living. I mean, Vanya says that community is a gift of God, and it really is a gift of God. You can't just say, right, I'll have a community and we'll do this and we'll do that, because it's too dangerous and it's too difficult. God nurtured us, and I talk about the apprenticeship in community, and the apprenticeship was long, and we learned a lot in that time, and we were able to pass on what we learned to what eventually became the Northumbria community. And I think that legacy it still exists, and I'm now using that legacy to help other communities for them to give birth to themselves, to help them along, individuals, businesses, or whatever.